All right, we all know the 2024 running back class is not the strongest, but of course, Zach and I are going to break it down and give you Zach's top 20 rookie running backs coming into the 2024 draft class. Look, we don't want to waste any more time. We're going to go straight into it. We're going to have these long conversations about these running backs. So, Zach, take us through your tier one.
All right, tier one for me has been the same since we started this process back in November and December. It hasn't changed for me. And there are two names in there. That is Trey Benson and that is Jonathan Brooks.
Okay.
Now,
Makes sense.
Travion Henderson was in that tier. Obviously, he goes back to school. That hurts the class at the running back position pretty drastically. But I still like these two names up here, and Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks. And, you know, I know a lot of people don't believe there is a consensus RB1 in the class, but for me personally, I believe it will be between one of these two names.
Right.
I know some people disagree, but as far as Trey Benson goes, I mean, what do you want in a running back? Because I feel like he has it. Like, I don't think there is a single skill set that Trey Benson doesn't have. He's got size. He's 6'1", 223.
Right.
He's got speed at that size. He's got burst at that size. No player hit 21 miles per hour or greater in a single game more times than Trey Benson this year. He's got short area quickness. He's got strength through contact. He's an underrated pass catcher, which not many people talk about. He didn't have a lot of opportunities, but the opportunities that he had, he absolutely shined on film as a pass catcher, keeping in mind that he was sharing the field with Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, all these players who might go in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft.
Right.
He's an underrated pass catcher. He had a 52.1 breakaway percentage, so we know he's an explosive playmaking running back. And by the way, 0 career fumbles ever. Hasn't fumbled once, over 315 career attempts. You can't get much better than that, can you?
No.
So I think he's just a complete running back. I see shades of David Montgomery, Javonte Williams, Rashad Penny before, you know, he went down with that significant injury. And then Jonathan Brooks. I mean,
phenomenal.
I am wholeheartedly convinced that there is not a more exciting running back to watch on film than Jonathan Brooks in this entire class. And I might have Trey Benson a spot ahead of him, but that might have a little bit to do with the ACL that Brooks is currently recovering from. We don't know exactly when he's going to be ready. You know, there are some Texas fans in the comment section saying he'll be ready week 1, day 1. I'm a little bit more hesitant. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But regardless, he won't have his entire rookie camp. We know how important that is for these young players coming into the NFL. He won't have the rookie camp. He won't be, you know, practicing with the team in preseason. So I'm concerned as far as when exactly he becomes a fantasy reliable asset. And I'm not sure that we can really rely on him to be, you know, the guy in year 1. You have to think about it. People keep talking about how Breece Hall came back from his ACL and was a monster. Well, there's a lot longer list of running backs who have torn their ACL, and they were not the same player the year after they tore their ACL for the most part. Now, there are exceptions, and maybe Jonathan is that exception. For the most part, you got to wait a year until you're really the same player. But as far as just his film before the ACL, ridiculously fluid motions. I've said this before, I'll say it again. Watching him in the open field is like watching motor oil flow through an engine. It's truly special. It is street art in football form. He's got great vision. He's a very creative player. And that is something that I think stands out from him compared to the rest of the class. Not a lot of this class has creativity behind the line of scrimmage where they can create for themselves. Jonathan Brooks has that in strides. He's a very good pass catcher. Use him in the screen game like you used Travis Etienne out of Jacksonville because he's got that speed. He can break it for a home run play. And I'm just a huge fan of his game, man. I see a lot of Etienne. I see a lot of Cam Akers out of Florida State before the injury, and that was a very exciting player as well, you know, before he went down. So these are two guys that I feel super confident can be starters in the NFL. Yeah, I legitimately think they can be starting running backs in the NFL. I'm not going to sit here and say they're guaranteed to, but I think these guys have a chance to go top 50 to 60 to 70 in the NFL draft. And depending on where they land, I think they could start day 1.
Look,
Jonathan Brooks with his injury, you know what I'm trying to say. Not day 1.
Exactly. You know, just to give you my thought process, if you guys are maybe like me, I do have Jonathan Brooks as RB1 in this class. Yes, I know he tore his ACL. And I'm on the side where I do believe he has the window to come back and recover and be ready at least minimum by week 4. Now, I think week 1 for me is a bit of a stretch. I would say week 4 to 5 feels really comfortable to me. Now, is he going to be producing what we hope and expect, the Trey Bensons to be producing in week 1? Probably not. But I think when I think of the longevity of Dynasty, when I think of who is probably going to be one of the most successful running backs out of this class, which is already a weak class, and a guy who came into this class with his team telling him that, hey, you have a torn ACL, and we still believe, in my opinion, they said this to him, we still believe you could be a top 3 running back in this class. I think that is a home run smash, especially when he was both our RB1s before the injury, right? So,
sure. I mean, I think something that you and I disagree on then, if that's your stance, is that I think Trey Benson can start week 1, day 1.
Oh, I definitely agree. I agree that they both can. I'm just saying, I think I like Jonathan Brooks, the prospect, and I think once he comes back from that ACL tear, I think the longevity of what I'm picturing him as a fantasy asset might be a little bit more successful with the PPR upside. Not that Trey Benson doesn't have that, but Jonathan Brooks did do a lot of that in Texas. And the way I've kind of seen him is, the prime Dalvin Cook back in the day, someone that has really great vision that can be a PPR monster. So I love both of these guys. They're both in my tier 1. I just have them flipped. And hey, we can definitely see where these guys land. I think they both get top, day 3 minimum draft capital with the even higher ceiling if they do get drafted.
I mean round 3?
Round 3, excuse me.
Day 3 would be
the
last round.
Round 3 draft capital, if not with higher upside if they do get there. But look, love both of these guys. Now take us through your tier 2.
Yeah, tier 2, these are all players that I like and I think could function pretty easily as either role players or starters if injuries happened ahead of them.
Okay.
And for various reasons, I like them. But Bucky Irvin, my RB3, that's one of the latest changes that happened in version 2 of our rookie report.
Mm-hmm.
Then Marshawn Lloyd, a guy who I have been putting respect on this entire offseason. I don't feel like anyone else has. And then at the Senior Bowl, all reports are that he was the best running back there. That's at least what I've heard. Now, there's a lot of different people with different opinions, right?
Right.
Blake Corum, I'll also put in this category, and then Braylon Allen. Who do we want to talk about first, I guess, because I would cluster these guys all together, but I know some people some people have Allen as an RB1 in the class, and I just don't I can't get there, but some people have Corum, so what do we want to talk about here?
I think those are the 2 guys I wanted to hit on here, Blake and Braylon Allen, because we've seen some of these guys be as high as top 3 in some of these people's ranking, or in the community's rankings, excuse me, calling you guys people, but in the community's rankings, and give us a little bit of a reason why they're not as high. You have him as RB 5 and 6. It looks like Blake and Braylon Allen at the moment.
So, I guess with Blake, I guess I should just start by saying I don't think this is a strong class where there's a Bijan or even an Etienne in his class where it's that's the clear-cut guy.
Right.
So, look, there's a world where Blake and Braylon are the RB1. I just don't personally believe that's going to happen. But as far as Blake goes, he's a very good player, but there are some huge red flags on his profile. I mean, firstly, he came back for another year when he was already eligible. And we said this when he was coming back. I said, I don't understand how he puts up better numbers, is more efficient than what he was last year. And he wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
The metrics this year are awful in 2023. He was a great player for this team. This team won the national championship. He scored a bunch of touchdowns, but the metrics, when you dive deep, are truly awful this year. They're just not good. And we have to keep in mind he was coming back from that injury, so I'll give him some grace. But this is out of 157 running backs with 100 attempts in college football this year. Okay? 157 running backs met that qualifier. In yards per attempt, he was 103rd, 4.8. Yards after contact per attempt, 151st. We're talking about him as this bulldog, get through contact type of player, and I see that on film. But yards after contact per attempt, he is one of the worst running backs this year with that qualifier. Missed tackles forced, he only forced 30 missed tackles. That's 88th. His breakaway percentage was 104th. His elusive rating was 152nd. So
Right.
there's a lot of red flags. I mean, we're talking about a really productive player who had an incredible career, but has a lot of miles, has an injury that he's dealt with, and was not efficient whatsoever this year. So I'm not going to sit here and say that he's not going to be a good player. I think Blake Corum could handle 15 to 20 carries in the NFL today. However, he's nowhere near the athlete that Trey Benson and Jonathan Brooks are. He's just not even in the same stratosphere athletically as those two names, in my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And another thing, he doesn't have much like long run speed either. I mean, this isn't going to be a player that's like breaking away. Like Benson and Brooks, give him an edge, give him a lane, and they could break it for like a 70-yard touchdown. Blake is not like he's going to churn it consistent yards, but he's not going to be that breakaway guy. So it almost feels like he's a little bit more reliant upon volume. So I like Blake, I really do, but I'm not going to sit here and say that he's like my number one running back in the class because that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love his low center of gravity. I do see a little Ray Rice, a little Maurice Jones-Drew, but I also see a little Boston Scott, a little Dion Lewis. So somewhere in between there. What I will say is he gets too much hate as a pass catcher. I think he's a better pass catcher than people give him credit for. I still like this player, but I'm not even considering him in that RB1 conversation personally.
Right. And I think that's what's really interesting when I hear about people in the community saying they love someone like Blake and Braylon, because in my opinion, when I watch their game, they're phenomenal in college. They just don't fit the NFL mold currently. When you think of forget about fantasy. When you think of Braylon Allen going into an NFL mold, it's really I don't think you can look at every 32 NFL teams and say he can fit in every single one. And I'm not saying...
You're right. It's very team dependent. It's got to be the right landing spot.
Exactly. It has to be the right landing spot when it comes down to these type of mold of running backs. And this is why we have the pass catching backs, the little, maybe they're a little bit smaller, elusive running backs that can get into space higher, because we've seen how successful they can be in the NFL. I mean, we've seen how successful Tajay Spears has been, and now he looks like he's going to be getting an opportunity where you look at the Damian Pierce, who I personally liked coming out, right?
Don't put me in that category.
I know. I personally liked where he was a bowling ball type of, running a guy that can get you that first and second down and be a goal line type of production. That's the same mold that Braylon Allen and Blake Corum is in right now. Now, they can both get pass catching opportunities. Not saying they are completely, if they can't catch a ball, but they are in a mold where they're going to be either a first and second down guy or a goal line guy, which is still successful, but very limited when you think about a fantasy perspective. Now you take it, you bring it into the fantasy perspective, and you're like, dang, how successful can he be? Because you think about Derrick Henry, why was he successful? Because he got 30 touches, and the more touches you gave him, the more opportunities.
He was a volume shooter, which is what 100%. I called Braylon Allen. You need volume to get the big
1,000%. And I think that's what limits these guys in the next level. Now, if you're telling me Braylon Allen is going to go to the Tennessee Titans and the Tennessee Titans is going to give him 30 touches a game, I'll probably have him RB1. If that's guaranteed to me.
Which, by the way, they just hired the old guy from Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. So it doesn't feel like they want that offense.
Exactly.
To be the future of their
and
team.
There's so many different landing spots that these guys could potentially go where they can be successful, but it's really team and landing spot dependent when it comes down to both these guys. We love them as prospects. They just don't fit the current NFL mold, unfortunately. And
I agree.
Yeah.
I would say as well, by the way, on Braylon, so you put him in Baltimore, he can easily have the Gus Edwards role. Same for Blake Corum, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's totally places where he can go where it's more enticing. However, when people keep using Derrick Henry as a comp for Braylon Allen, as if that is common in the NFL.
It's not.
Do you know how rare, Derrick Henry, there's no one like Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
So you're betting on an outlier, and respectfully, I think Derrick Henry was a better prospect. I think he was more exciting on film, but we can disagree.
A lot of people
disagrees. The last thing I'll say, Badaki, is Braylon Allen, you're right, doesn't fit the NFL because, in my personal opinion, teams are looking for playmakers to put them in space and take advantage of the space that's now being given in the NFL. And Braylon Allen's worst trait, in my opinion, is when you put him in space. There's no elusiveness. He's very stiff. He's not got that make your man miss ability. he needs to get downhill. It takes him a little while to get there. And then once he's downhill, he can bowl you over in the open field. But if you're saying catch the ball, dump offs, get you in space, creative plays, expect you to make a man miss, with a juke or, this sort of make your man miss ability, that's not there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got insane strength, but it's not, the versatility is not there.
Yeah. And once again, we would happy to reevaluate both Blake and Braylon if that landing spot is somewhere where we can see them be really successful and get those opportunities. So just keep that in mind. I don't think we dislike these prospects.
No, don't dislike them. Just they're nowhere near the RB1 conversation.
Yeah, completely agree. All right, take us.
And I would just say as well, just on Bucky and Marshawn, because I don't want to skip over them.
Sure.
I'm not going to say that they're like similar players, but I think they both excite us with the traits that they bring to an NFL offense. I think they both can be like a Tajay Spears or a change of pace back. They're nowhere near Devon Achane level talent, but last year I loved Devon Achane. I just felt like he fit the NFL like a glove for what they're looking for right now. It's a copycat league, and a lot of teams are going to be looking at Devon Achane and say, how can we do that? How can we get this Tajay Spears type of player?
Yeah.
I think Bucky and Marshawn both fit that template. They both got nasty jump cuts, make your man miss ability, great pass catchers. I think Bucky had over 60 targets this year, which is crazy. Insane. Some of the wide receivers you're talking about didn't even get that many targets. So yeah, with Marshawn, I think Tajay, Nyheim Hines, a mix between him. And with Bucky, it's like Tajay and James White, somewhere in between there. So I think both of those players really excite me in PPR formats.
Yeah, completely agree. Love both of these guys. I think we're on the same page when it comes down to your first two tiers.
Just before we get into the next tier, we want to quickly let you guys know about something very exciting. We have released version 2.0 of our 2024 rookie report. So let me ask you, do you want to dive deep into this class? Hear about the names that nobody's talking about and get a full evaluation of those players?
Yeah.
Well, all you need to do is use a promo code LAND, become a Mother Flocker member on the Flock Fantasy website, and you will instantly access that report, as well as any updates that come in the future, as well as our rankings for one quarterback, for Superflex, as well as a Dynasty team review.
Yeah.
All that gets unlocked when you become a Mother Flocker member. So let's get back to the video. Let's talk about sleepers. Yeah, that's how shallow this class is.
We're with sleepers
now
already.
talking about sleepers already. But there are some names that I really like. Jalen Wright, who probably rose the most for me in V2.
Okay.
Baby Ray Davis, I love him.
Baby
and then
Rays.
Audric Estime. Who do we want to talk about first here?
We'll talk about Jalen Wright. You said he was one of your biggest risers. Why did he rise? I'm assuming, I'm pretty sure he was at the Senior Bowl, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think so.
But if not, take us through it.
But I really enjoyed watching his film and diving a little deeper on Jalen Wright. This is a player that I really liked. I just hadn't, actually dived into the film just yet. But we're talking about a guy who's 20 years old, will be 21 in April. So not an old player. There's a lot of old players in this class. Marshawn, Blake. These guys are a little bit older. Ray Davis, who we'll talk about. But Jalen Wright, a young player, not a lot of mileage on his legs. I mean, he's never really dominated the backfield. He's never had, a ridiculous amount of carries, which that could be a negative and it could be a positive because, his career high in percentage of team rushing attempts was 28%. That was this year.
Okay.
So there's positives and negatives. You can look at that, two sides to that coin, right? But something I like about his traits, he is a home run hitter. Absolutely. Felt like every game I watched of Jalen Wright.
He was gone.
There's like one time a game, it's like 50-yard touchdown. Yeah. He's gone. You're not catching him. He had a breakaway percentage of 15.1%, which was 11th best when you look at those qualifiers we add. I think he would thrive in a gap scheme. Over 75% of his carries were gap runs at Tennessee. So if the right NFL offense kind of lines up there, I think they could be excited about using him.
Yep.
He has good patience behind his line of scrimmage. Like, I don't imagine the offensive line being angry with him. I think these guys are these hard-nosed dudes trying to make a lane for you. If you make the lane, he's going to see it and he's going to explode through that lane. Right. However, he's not Jonathan Brooks where he's got this creativity to create for himself behind the line of scrimmage. I think he's an underrated pass catcher. And for his size, He's 5'11", 210. He is much better in pass protection than I thought he would be. He blocked way above his weight. He showed a really good understanding of how to recognize his assignments. And he's got a good, little burst, little speed. He can hit the edge quickly. So he's an exciting little like pocket rocket type of player, if you will. Like Jerick McKinnon's of the world is kind of how I view him. Almost like Jerome Ford, somewhere in between Jerome Ford and Jerick McKinnon. Okay. Obviously, those, I think somewhere in between there's where you see him. Those are different players, but, he's not like strictly the Jerick McKinnon profile, but in between Ford and McKinnon, somewhere there. Or even like a Ty Chandler type of player. So in PPR formats, he's exciting, but at the same time, he didn't really have the lateral agility I wanted to see. He had 4 fumbles last year, and his strength is extremely underwhelming. So he's not going to be like a pile pusher. I don't imagine him being like a 3-down back, unfortunately. But he's exciting, man.
Yeah, he definitely is exciting. And, I actually found that he has a little bit more strength than I expected, because one of the guys I compared him to was like an Isaiah Pacheco type of player. Now, he may not be as strong as Isaiah Pacheco, but I feel like the way he runs and the force that he brings in between those tackles at times, I kind of see the glimmers of that. With the Jerome Fords, right? Because Jerome Fords likes to go towards contact as well, as much as Isaiah Pacheco does. So I do like Jalen Wright as well. He's one of my guys. And obviously, Sweet Baby Rays.
Yeah, we both love this guy.
One of these guys that is an older prospect, 24 years old. Really surprising, came in at 5'8", 220 after Senior Bowl. But somebody,
he's just a ball of mass.
He is, which I think it's going to be a little bit surprising for some people, because I think he's a do-it-all type of guy. He can catch the ball, and he can be that first and second down guy. That's going to be a little bit of surprise for a lot of people. He's currently Sorry,
did you know, when you talked about him being a receiver, did you know that he had 32 receptions for 324 yards and 7 receiving touchdowns?
7 touchdowns, exactly. This is why
in the air alone.
This is why I believe he is he is my number 1 sleeper, because of how dangerous he can be in the pass catching game, where a lot of people, once again, you don't see Blake having 7 touchdowns in the air, neither does Braylon, which
no one in this class.
He has that opportunity with 14 touchdowns on the ground, by the way, as well. Look, Ray Davis may be one of these older prospects that he may be somebody that's going to come in and be like a backup to somebody, but be really successful when he does come in and maybe take that job away from somebody. So I really love Sweet Baby Rays. Once again, one of my biggest risers from the Senior Bowl that had an incredible catch as well. Yeah. And one of these highlights, I'm pretty sure like somebody, I think you might have tweeted it out. That's how I saw it. So yeah, I love Ray Davis there.
43.8% of his total snaps, he ran a receiving route. And he was very impressive on the ground. Very good play strength. And I loved that he comped himself to who I comped him to at the Senior Bowl, which was Jaylen Warren.
Okay, cool.
If you guys have been watching our videos, but Jaylen Warren has been my number 1 comp from him since day one, and it was awesome to see him use that comp himself at the Senior Bowl to describe his play. And I think his story is the coolest thing about him. We talked about it before, but in case anyone doesn't know, he didn't have parents growing up. He was in and out of foster care. He was homeless for a time. He made everything happen by himself. The only reason he got into SEC football was because of himself. Nothing was given to him. And I just think he's the type of guy who's going to join a running back room, who's going to demand respect from all of his peers, and is going to also demand a role within an offense, regardless of what that looks like. So,
completely agree.
But obviously, older player. Not sure he's going to get very high draft capital, so that is going to be a little bit of a hit.
Yeah, completely agree. And then Aldrick Estime, this is a big boy.
I'll say this: there are certain players I think are more suited to the collegiate level than the NFL, and he falls under that category. I think if spreadsheet people might love him. People who look at the stats might love him because he put up some ridiculous stats this year. But my personal opinion, and it doesn't mean that it's right, it's just my personal opinion, and based off of the 3 games that I watched of all 22, he's just not a player that I think excites me at the next level. There's little to no receiving upside. 0.5% of his snaps he lined up as a receiver. That's ridiculously low. If you look at the last 4 classes combined, that's probably very close to the bottom, if not completely at the bottom. Doesn't have much short area quickness or explosiveness or burst, doesn't move left to right very well. One of these guys, I'm not going to say similar to Braylon Allen because they're different players, but the skill set is like physicality, smack you in the mouth.
Which is great. Like, we love that too.
Consistent yardage, but maybe, and I'm not going to say maybe, definitely not an all-around player. I'd say A.J. Dillon is the closest comp I could come up with.
Yeah. He is a big body running back, more of a goal line type of opportunity coming into the NFL. Not somebody I believe that's going to be a fantasy relevant guy. Maybe he'll be one of those spike weeks type of opportunities. Maybe he comes in, scores 3 touchdowns with 4 yards, right?
Yeah.
That's the type of upside or opportunities we can see with Aldrick Estime here. All right, take us through your next tier.
All right, deep sleepers. We'll go through the rest of these tiers relatively quickly, but just so you guys know who to look out for. Cody Schrader, Dylan Johnson, and then a name that has come out of nowhere that's come from people that I trust.
Okay.
And I want to look at him before we release version 3.
Okay.
I thought I'd throw his name out there. Isaac Herendo. Isaac Herendo. Okay. Very exciting player out of Louisville. People that I trust like this guy. So I'm putting his name in there. I have not personally scouted him yet. Okay. Just to kind of shout him out. But he and another guy, which we'll talk about, Jawar Jordan, shared the backfield in Louisville this year. Over 1,000 all-purpose yards, 22 receptions, and transferred over from Wisconsin because of Braylon Allen. But Cody Schrader, I'll just quickly say, is another story that I love. I mean, this is a guy who played 4 years at D2 football, and he thought after dominating Division II, he'd get a bunch of scholarship opportunities to transfer over to a D1 program. Got 0. Yeah. So after doing 4 years of college in a D2 school, he decided to walk on at Mizzou, eventually won that job at Mizzou, and becomes maybe their best running back in the last decade. He's the first player in Mizzou history to have 6 straight games of 100-plus rushing yards, including 200 yards versus Arkansas in the finale of the regular season. He's got good patience. He's kind of like this do-it-all back that I'm 100%. Concerned won't get the draft capital necessary. Jalen Warren, Austin Eckler light type of play, but unfortunately I don't think he'll get the draft capital. And Dylan Johnson, I just threw in there because he's a fine complimentary back, and he's performed pretty well. I actually comped Dylan Johnson to what the 2023 version of Ezekiel Elliott was. Right. Because I think they give you something similar, which, is a nice little reliever back.
Yeah, completely agree. Cody Schrader, I kind of comped into more of like a thicker Kyron Williams. I like the physicality that he brings, a guy that can play a pass-catching guy. And Dylan Johnson, more of like a Joshua Kelly. I think a backup, just a backup in the league. And Isaac, really interesting. I'm going to have to look him up. So I'm interested to see what his tape looks like here as well. Yeah. All right, take us to your next ones.
All right, Tier 5, Will Shipley and Frank Gore Jr., who apparently is going to run a 4.23.
Yeah, I mean,
if you guys were on our live streams, you know the inside joke. Will Shipley, I'll be honest, just doesn't impress me at all. He's just not an impressive athlete. He lost his job in college. Why am I supposed to be excited about that? Frank Gore Jr., a lot of people love this guy. What I will say is he's nothing like his dad. Yeah. I mean, his dad is like this hard-nosed physicality type of player.
Yeah, different play style.
Frank Gore Jr. Thrives in space with his burst, with his speed, with his make your man miss ability. There's strong third down appeal. However, playing in the Sun Belt Conference, it's hard to really gauge how good a player is. We did get a couple games where he faced major schools, and he performed very poorly. Versus Florida State last year, he had 31 yards on 11 carries, which is 2.8 yards per attempt. Right. Versus Tulane, he had 16 yards on 13 carries, which is 1.2 yards per attempt. He had a 4.9 yards per attempt while playing in the Sun Belt. So I'm really struggling to understand how I'm supposed to be excited about this player. I think he's a smaller TJ Yeldon. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. I comped him more to like a Justice Hill type of Michael Carter-esque type of player. a reliever guy, maybe for a player two, potentially what Frank Gore can do here. And then Will Shipley, I see him more as a special teams type of player. Maybe he goes undrafted, goes on the special teams, or maybe he does get drafted in the late rounds still as a special teams type of running back here. Take us to your next one, running backs to monitor.
Yeah, we'll just finish off with a couple tiers here. Running backs to monitor. Jace McClellan. Why are we monitoring him? Because he played for Alabama. Like, quite frankly, I wrote this down in my notes. If he wasn't an Alabama running back, I'm not even sure we would even have heard of his name or know that he existed. No disrespect. Dylan Lobb is really fun. He's fun because he had 68 receptions for 700 yards and 7 touchdowns last year.
Right.
Which I guess is better than what Ray Davis did. But he did it at New Hampshire, which is not a very good program. And also on the ground, he's not very effective. I think he's a passing threat, but not exciting on the ground.
Okay.
Jawar Jordan out of Louisville is an exciting name to kind of keep your name, to keep your eyes on. He shared the backfield with Isaac Horrendo. And then running backs to monitor part 2, we got Carson Steele, Amani Bailey, Kendall Milton out of Georgia, and Meehan Williams. I think that's Mayan, actually.
Yeah, Mayan Williams.
I might have mispronounced that. But I don't even know if these guys are going to get like top 6 round draft capital at, the bottom here. But yeah, this is what we got.
This is a weak class, guys. So, I mean, if you have a early second round, I think that's probably the best for the top 2 tiers. Maybe you got the 201 to the 204, 205. That's just probably where tier 1 and tier 2 is most likely going to live, depending on landing spot. And the rest, most likely going to be late second, middle of the third round, or later, depending on, or some guys you might pick up because they didn't get drafted and they just get into an opportunity. This is not the strongest class, unfortunately, but there is definitely some upside in some of these players, no doubt.
I think there's a huge drop off from tier 2 to sleepers. And then I think there's an even bigger drop off from deep sleepers to tier 5. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of these guys will go undrafted in your standard 4-round super flex drafts. But that's it for today. We appreciate y'all. Like the video. We'll see you very soon. All up. Now that those idiots are done talking, who needs some rankings?
Hell yeah, I need some rankings.
Then use promo code LAND, LAND, for 30% off any membership at flockfantasy.com.
Oh.
It's so easy. Even your grandma could scan that QR code right there.